On the night of March 19th, 1998, a small television station in Northern Ontario broadcast for the last time. It did not announce that it was closing. There was no farewell, no final message, no acknowledgement that anything was ending. The station simply broadcast through the night, as it always had, and then at 6:02 the following morning it stopped. A recording of that final overnight broadcast surfaced online in 2021. It is incomplete, it is damaged, and in several places it does not make sense. CKNL-TV 13 began broadcasting in 1971. It served a small region of Northern Ontario, a handful of towns, a population that never exceeded 40,000 people across its entire coverage area. It was, for most of its existence, a relay station. It carried network programming, inserted local advertising, and produced a small amount of its own content. A regional news segment, a weekly community program, and the overnight weather service that the region depended on through the winter. It employed, at its peak, 14 people. By 1998, it employed 3. The station's overnight operations by 1998 were handled by a single engineer. His name was Raymond Toll. He had worked at CKNL since 1968, 3 years before it went on the air. He had helped build it. He had operated its overnight broadcast alone for the better part of 30 years. On the night of March 19th, 1998, Raymond Toll was the only person in the building. He did not know it would be the last broadcast. That decision had been made elsewhere by people he had never met, and it had not yet been communicated to him. He found out the following morning. The recovered recording is 6 hours and 2 minutes long. It was, in all likelihood, recorded by a viewer. Someone who set a home VCR to capture the overnight broadcast, possibly for the weather service, possibly out of habit. The tape is degraded in the way all VHS tapes of this age are degraded. There is tracking distortion. There is color loss. There are sections where the image breaks down entirely. None of that is unusual. What is unusual begins at the timestamps. CKNL displayed a running timestamp in the lower corner of its overnight broadcast alongside the current weather conditions. For the first 2 hours of the recording, the timestamp advances normally. At 2:14 in the morning, it stops advancing. It remains at 2:14 for the next 40 minutes of footage. The broadcast continues. The weather updates. The image changes, but the timestamp holds at 2:14, unmoving for 40 minutes, and then resumes at 2:54, exactly where it would have been had it never stopped. There is no technical explanation for this that the archive has been able to confirm. At several points during the recording, the regular overnight programming is interrupted by weather alerts. This was standard. The region relied on CKNL for severe weather information, and the station was equipped to override its broadcast with alerts as conditions required. The alerts on the recording are properly formatted. They use the correct graphics. They appear in the correct location, but the conditions they describe do not match the conditions that night. According to Environment Canada records, the night of March 19th, 1998 was cold and clear across CKNL's coverage area. There was no storm. The weather alerts on the recording describe a severe winter storm. Heavy snow, dangerous wind chill, a warning to stay indoors. They describe conditions that did not exist that night. The archive cross-referenced the specific figures cited in the alerts. They match the records for a different storm. a storm that struck the same region in March of 1978, 20 years earlier, almost to the day. The most significant inconsistencies are the edits. At irregular intervals throughout the recording, the overnight broadcast is interrupted by fragments of older material. A station identification card from the 1970s. A few seconds of a community program that, according to CKNL's own archives, last aired in 1983. A test pattern in a format the station stopped using in the 1980s. These fragments are brief, a few seconds each. They appear without warning and without transition. They are spliced directly into the overnight feed. For some time, these fragments were treated as corruption, as damage to the tape, or as signal interference. But corruption does not select for meaning. Every fragment spliced into that final broadcast is from CKNL's own history. Everyone is a piece of the station's past. Its early identification cards, its old programs, the storm it once warned its region about, they are not random. They were placed there, and there was only one person in the building that night who could have placed them. Raymond Toll was 61 years old on the night of the final broadcast. He had been told 3 days earlier that the station's license would not be renewed and that operations would cease. He had been asked not to discuss it. The closure had not yet been made public. He worked his overnight shift on March 19th, knowing it would be the last one. He told no one. He simply went to work as he had for 30 years and operated the broadcast alone through the night. The archive's conclusion, and it is a conclusion, not a certainty, is this. On the last night, alone in the building, Raymond Toll went into the station's tape library and selected pieces of its history, the first identification card the station ever used. A community program from its better years. The weather alert from the 1978 storm, the night the station had, by several accounts, mattered most to the people it served. The night it had kept them informed and safe. And across the final overnight broadcast, in fragments without explanation, he spliced them in. The frozen timestamp, the storm that wasn't there, the old cards surfacing in the feed. It was not corruption. It was a man, alone, refusing to let 30 years end on nothing. At 6:02 on the morning of March 20th, 1998, CKNL-TV 13 broadcast its final image and went dark. There was no farewell. There was no message. But for anyone who recorded that night and who watched it closely enough, the farewell was there the entire time. Folded into the static, hidden in the timestamps, spoken in the only language a man who had given 30 years to a building had left to speak it in. Raymond Toll died in 2009. He never discussed the final broadcast. When asked about it once by a local historian, he said only that he had wanted to do it properly. He did not explain what he meant. The archive believes he already had.